And Earl, we have time for a few questions before our break. And is there somebody that didn't ask a question already? Then we'll go to Rebecca. She's full of questions.
Earl, I may have missed this. Verse 7, you said Deliria used 2 times, and you gave the example of the disciples at the sea. I didn't hear the second time. I'd like you to address that.
It's just Matthew and Luke, Matthew and Mark. They both use that word in the ship story.
Okay, all right. And then in verse 10, you said that death had lost its energy. Why is that an important distinction? What are the nuances as opposed to how we see abolished right there? Could you speak to that a little more?
Yeah, against its energy. Erg means energy. Oh, by the way, when people ask a question, do stand so they can get you better in terms of the filming. But, because you who ask questions are being filmed too. Erg means, it's a big word for Paul. It's not just James who loves the word erg. You show me your faith with your words, I'll show you my faith with my erg, work, what I do. It's an event, it means event. And the event, Paul is not saying that we don't die, we do die, but the durability, the finality of death has been canceled because of Jesus Christ's victory over death. So it's part of the Christus Victor theology that Paul has, that Christ has won a victory over death. In fact, this word is, I said it's used here, but it's used also in 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul says, "O death, where is thy sting? Where is thy finality?" And he used it again, and once again used the word immortality there, that mortal. It's against, there's something, there's more. It's also Romans 8. The whole created order is waiting on tiptoes for the coming of the children of God. God's decision in our behalf can't be canceled. And that's how Romans 8 ends. Neither height nor depth nor angels nor principalities can cancel the decision God made to love us in Jesus Christ. That again is the and here he decides just to use a very creative word to make the point. But I did want you to see that he uses that very creative word. Nobody else uses it quite like that as Paul does.
All right, let's move on to Ryan.
Good morning, Earl and Dr. Armstrong. I have a question. We went through these 12 verses, and there's just so much material. As a young preacher, and as I'm learning and growing, I'm learning that I'm finding as I'm growing, I'm taking on less material and focusing on it more rather than just having too much. So my question to both of you is, as you go through this process, what approaches or considerations do you take as to what you keep and what you dismiss?
Yeah. You want to speak to that too?
Yeah.
You did a great job in giving. I do think you need to look at material and see are there ways in which the material can be narrowed enough that people can get a handle on it, and that means, and that's what illustrations do. Illustrations, we only use one illustration really today, except for the stuff that came out of the historical context. But there are illustrations. A little mountaineering illustration was just in order to kind of focus on the two themes that were present in chapter in verse 12. I am not ashamed. I know whom I have believed. And I just wanted to illustrate that. But I think when you're preaching this, you have to divide and conquer. You have to decide, maybe your first sermon will be on just the first 7 verses. I've done that, where I've preached a whole sermon basically on the 4 things that Paul says were gifts that God, and then not get into the next thing. But I wanted to do, since I'm trying to do the entire book with you guys today, I wanted to break that rule and give you more. And then you as a preacher have got to decide the chunks in which you can handle it. And then there's an argument in favor of saying we're going to take 6 months on 2 Timothy, or 4 months on 2 Timothy, or as much as your congregation can endure. You don't want to say, well, not like the Ockenga 57 sermons on just chapter 12. I want to, but yet you may break it down and do it over a period of time. They each deserve, and I tried to show that second section, now, he says, now get into the game. Okay, get into the game, Paul. And that's, he uses the word hardship. That's why I love the word hardship. He doesn't say, I don't want you to come suffer. I'll do some suffering, but I want you in the game. And so he uses the word hardship. Get in the game. And then, and by the way, you need to know that you're in the game because Christ has put you in the game. And then finally, don't be ashamed of, he has the strength to hold you in the game. So I did kind of three things too with it like you did. You have to preach every Sunday.
I do, and I think this is probably the divide that we might determine or discern, which is, as pastor, you have that liberty to be able to determine sermon series, right, however long they may be, or Bible study series that you're going to do in the congregation. And so it allows you then to have a little bit less pressure in terms of not trying to get it all in, whereas perhaps if you're not the pastor or the senior pastor and you're not doing a series before a congregation, there may be the temptation and the sense that this may be my only shot. I'm going to get as much in as I can. and so it's that discipline, right, both by position that you have to work with. And even as pastor, right, I've 15 years there at Shiloh Baptist Church in Trenton, and folk are saying, there were times when I felt you were giving us too much. And I can look back and say, yeah. And then there's times where breadth versus depth, right? The depth, maybe just doing a word study on one of the words and really doing a deep dive on how Paul uses the word delaria in his epistles, right? I mean, that's a Bible study versus a sermon series, but, I'm getting to that point now where being able to define how we convey the material allows me some flexibility and not have to give everything at the same time.
All right, Patrick. George Whitfield said, if you're going to preach longer than 30 minutes, you better be an angel from God or have a congregation of angels.
Must be in Black Church.
I got a congregation of angels, right?
Forgive me for going back, but something was said last night that has stuck in my craw and I can't quite parse it out. The statement was made that revelation informs experience and not the other way around. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't make that statement,
No,
but
you did not.
I thought it was a very intriguing statement. That revelation, what God shows us, does informs the experience we have, and in a sense, hermeneutics. It interprets it. So the God, what He shows about His grace, enables me to handle this hardship. So the hardship is not seen stranded by itself. So that you go into such an elaborate study of the hardship Paul's facing. After all, he's there after the fire of Rome, which was 64 AD. I'll say more about that later. But the fire of Rome, and the persecution of Christians is quite intense by Nero, because Nero was the emperor at that time. But he doesn't even mention Nero's name or anything in this book. But yet we realize that experience of suffering and hardship is not seen by itself. It's seen in you might say we're enlightened about it. We can handle it because we know that God has called us and He has disarmed its worst threat. Its worst threat has now lost its sting and its finality. And the same thing He does in the end of Romans 8. Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? And you know the word condemn, kata krino, means who has the right to say the last word. And then he said, is it Jesus Christ? And then he surprises you and says, yes, He has the right to say the last word. And He's the one who is our lawyer. He's the one who is our defense attorney. He's the one who has loved us, and nothing can cancel out His love. So see, He does the same thing. He faces up to the danger, but then it's disarmed by the revelation. The revelation of God's love disarms the finality of the danger of the hardship.
Well, not having been here last night and having privy, but just my immediate response, and based on what Dr. Palmer said, you know, when I think about theodicy and the issue of suffering and all that comes with that and how we reconcile that with our faith, the notion that we often pray for in acts of suffering is, God, take the suffering away from me. Remove the suffering, heal the suffering. And rarely is our prayers, God, step into the suffering with me. And so I often cite, as we often do in my tradition, you know, the 3 Hebrew boys, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. God didn't take them out of the furnace. He stepped in the furnace with them. Daniel. God didn't take Daniel out of the lion's den. God steps into the lion's den, shuts the lion's mouth. And so therefore, what does it mean for me in my suffering? The revelation then that God is Emmanuel. He's Im, with, Manu, us, God, El. God is with us, even in our suffering.
That's helpful, thank you.
Wow, that's all the time we're going to have for questions now, because we're taking a break and we're going to be back here at 11 o'clock. A couple of other interesting people you might want to meet. Shirley Palmer is with us.
Oh, boy.
She probably didn't want to be acknowledged, but she is a great, great life partner for Earl. They've been married 58 years. And, yeah. Wonderful family. And also Reverend Palmer's study assistant, Stephen Michelle, is with us as well this week. So, and thanks again, Dale and all the others that have provided such a wonderful opportunity for us here. We're going to take a break out here, and then we'll return. Yeah, coffee's right around the corner, and then we'll be starting again at 11 o'clock.
Hey, you're in church.